The evening air carried a slight chill as Lieutenant General Robert Chen drove his personal vehicle, a modest navy blue sedan, through the outskirts of the city. The three-star general had just wrapped up a long day at a military strategy conference and was looking forward to a quiet night at home. His uniform hung neatly in the back seat as he preferred comfortable civilian clothes for the drive, a simple gray sweater and dark slacks. 30 years of military service had earned him the right to relax when off duty. The roads were relatively empty, street lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. Chen's mind drifted between the day's discussions on regional security and thoughts of his upcoming leave. His daughter had just started college, and he was planning to visit her campus next weekend. A small smile touched his lips at the thought. The flash of blue and red lights in his rearview mirror pulled him back to the present. With practiced calm, he signaled and eased his car to the shoulder of the road, hands visible on the steering wheel, a habit born from understanding the tensions that could arise during traffic stops, especially for people of color. Two officers approached his vehicle, one on each side. The one who came to his window, Officer Patrick Reynolds, was a stocky man with a rigid posture and tight-lipped expression. His partner, a younger officer, hung back slightly on the passenger side. "License and registration," Officer Reynolds demanded without preamble, his flashlight beam sweeping across Chen's face and then the interior of the car. "Good evening, officer," Chen replied evenly, maintaining eye contact. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" "Your vehicle matches a description," Reynolds said curtly. "License and registration, now." Chen nodded calmly. "I'm going to reach for my wallet in my back pocket, and then for my registration in the glove compartment. Is that all right?" The officer gave a terse nod, his hand resting noticeably on his holster. Chen moved slowly, retrieving his wallet first. Along with his driver's license, he also pulled out his military ID. "Here's my license, registration, and my military identification. I'm Lieutenant General Robert Chen, United States Army." Reynolds barely glanced at the military ID, focusing instead on the license. His expression hardened. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," he ordered. "May I ask why?" "I don't believe I've violated any traffic laws," Chen asked. Confusion evident in his voice, I said. "Step out of the vehicle, now." Reynolds' tone grew sharper, his hand tightening on his holster. Recognizing the escalating tension, Chen complied, moving deliberately. "I'm opening my door slowly and stepping out as requested." As soon as Chen was standing, Reynolds grabbed his arm roughly and spun him to face the car. "Hands on the vehicle. Spread your legs." "Officer, I don't understand what's happening here," Chen said, maintaining his composure despite the treatment. "If you could explain—" "Shut it," Reynolds hissed, leaning closer. Under his breath, he added, "You people always think you're special. Military ID, sure. Probably fake anyway." The comment wasn't lost on Chen, who had encountered similar prejudice throughout his life, despite his rank and accomplishments. Still, he remained silent, knowing from experience that arguing would only make things worse. A few yards away, a car slowed. A middle-aged woman named Rita pulled over, instinctively concerned by what she was witnessing. She reached for her phone and began recording, her window rolled down just enough to capture audio. Reynolds conducted a rough pat-down, clearly more aggressive than necessary. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. "Nothing here," Reynolds announced, sounding almost disappointed. He glanced at Chen's car. "What's that in the back seat?" "That's my uniform, officer," Chen replied steadily. Reynolds peered inside, then snorted. "3 stars, huh? Playing dress-up for some kind of costume party?" Chen took a deep breath. "Officer Reynolds," he said, reading the nameplate. "I understand you're doing your job, but I would appreciate professional courtesy. That is my service uniform. I've just come from a military conference at Fort—" "Hands behind your back," Reynolds interrupted, pulling out his handcuffs. "Officer, this is unnecessary. If you'd just verify my identity." "Resisting an officer's commands now?" Reynolds' voice rose. "Hands behind your back." The younger officer finally spoke up. "Pat, maybe we should call this in first. If he's really a— Did I ask for your opinion, Brooks?" "He matches the description. Dark sedan, male driver, this area." Reynolds' justification was paper-thin, and everyone present knew it. Chen slowly placed his hands behind his back, maintaining his dignity even as the cold metal of handcuffs closed around his wrists. The injustice of the situation burned, but decades of military discipline helped him maintain his composure. Officer, I'm not resisting, but I am requesting that you contact my commanding officer. My phone is in my left pocket. You have my permission to retrieve it and find the contact. Reynolds ignored him, instead roughly guiding him toward the patrol car. As they passed Rita's vehicle, Chen made brief eye contact with her. She nodded slightly, indicating she was still recording. You're making a mistake, Chen said quietly. I'm not who you think I am. They all say that, Reynolds muttered, pushing Chen's head down as he forced him into the back seat of the patrol car. The door slammed with finality. Inside the patrol car, Chen sat straight despite the discomfort of the handcuffs. Through the partition, he could hear the officers talking. You're pushing it, Pat, Officer Brooks said, his voice tense. Did you even look at his military ID? What if he's legit? Please, Reynolds scoffed. You believe everything these people tell you? For all we know, he stole that uniform. And that car? Probably beyond his means, if you know what I mean. Chen closed his eyes briefly, letting the familiar pain of such assumptions wash over him. Throughout his career, from West Point to his current position overseeing operations across 3 states, he had encountered people like Reynolds. The difference was that now someone was watching, recording. Rita had pulled back onto the road, following at a discreet distance as the patrol car began moving. At the first red light, she quickly uploaded the video to social media with a caption, 3-star general being arrested right now. Police officer made racist comments, happening on Riverside Drive. Please share. As the patrol car headed toward the station, Chen focused on maintaining his mental clarity. He had faced enemy fire, negotiated with hostile foreign officials, and commanded thousands of troops in combat zones. This situation, while degrading, was another battle to be fought with strategy rather than emotion. At the station, Reynolds led Chen through the side entrance, away from the main reception area. Chen noted the avoidance of standard processing procedures. Another red flag. Officer, I am formally requesting to make a phone call, Chen stated as they entered a small holding area. You'll get your call when I decide you get it, Reynolds replied, pushing Chen into a chair. First, we're going to have a little chat about that fancy uniform and who it really belongs to. The room was sparse. A metal table, 2 chairs, and a large mirror that Chen recognized as one-way glass. Standard interrogation setup. He'd been on the other side of such mirrors many times, but never as the subject. Officer Brooks, Chen addressed the younger officer directly. I am Lieutenant General Robert Chen, commanding officer of the 4th Regional Command. I'm being detained without cause and denied my rights. I'm asking you, as someone who appears to understand the seriousness of this situation, to contact the proper authorities. Brooks looked uncomfortable, glancing between Chen and Reynolds. Pat, maybe you should wait outside if you can't handle this, Reynolds cut him off. I'll handle the questioning. As Brooks reluctantly left the room, Chen fixed his gaze on Reynolds. Your actions tonight will have consequences, officer. Not threats, simply facts. I've dedicated my life to serving this country, including protecting the rights of people like you to enforce the law properly. What you're doing now is not proper enforcement. Reynolds leaned across the table, his expression darkening. Listen here. The door opened and a sergeant stepped in, looking confused. Reynolds, what's going on? Why wasn't this processed through the front desk? Potential stolen valor case, Sarge. Guys driving around with a 3-star general's uniform, fake military ID. The sergeant looked at Chen more carefully, then back at Reynolds. And you didn't run his credentials through the system because... Was about to, Reynolds mumbled, suddenly less confident. Meanwhile, Rita's video was spreading rapidly through social media channels. Military groups quickly identified Chen from recent public appearances. Within 45 minutes of the initial stop, the video had reached several high-ranking officials, including some at the Interior Ministry. Inside the holding room, the sergeant was now looking at Chen's military ID with growing alarm. Officer Reynolds, step outside. Now. The sergeant's voice left no room for argument. As the door closed behind Reynolds, the sergeant turned to Chen. Sir, I don't know what to say. This is completely unacceptable. I'll have those cuffs removed immediately. Chen nodded, his expression grave but not angry. Thank you, Sergeant. I understand this wasn't your doing, but we do need to address what happened here tonight. Outside the room, the desk phone was ringing. The first of many calls that would soon turn this incident into a national story. and the beginning of a reckoning that Officer Reynolds never saw coming. Sergeant Wilson stared at the military ID in his hand, then back at Lieutenant General Chen, his face growing paler by the second. The 3 stars on the ID seemed to shine under the harsh fluorescent lights of the holding room. He had seen enough military IDs in his 20 years on the force to know this one was authentic. "Sir, I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for this situation," Wilson said, his voice tight with concern. He quickly moved to remove the handcuffs from Chen's wrists. This should never have happened. Chen rubbed his wrists gently once freed, his expression composed but serious. "Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate your intervention. I would like to make a phone call now." "Of course, sir. Right away." Wilson guided Chen out of the holding room and toward his office, deliberately avoiding the main booking area where curious eyes would only complicate matters. As they walked, Wilson shot a hard look at Officer Reynolds, who was standing by the water cooler with a defensive posture. "Wait in my office," Wilson told Reynolds in a tone that left no room for argument. "Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone." In Wilson's office, Chen was given access to a phone. His first call was to Colonel Thomas Lee, his chief of staff. "Tom, it's me," Chen said when the colonel answered. "I need you to listen carefully. I've been detained by local police." He explained the situation concisely, his military training evident in his clear, factual report, despite the personal nature of the incident. "They did what?" Lee's voice was loud enough that Wilson, standing respectfully by the door, could hear it clearly. "Sir, I'll be there in 20 minutes with the JAG officer. Don't say anything else until we arrive." "Understood," Chen replied, hanging up. He turned to Wilson. "My staff will be here shortly. In the meantime, I'd like to understand exactly why I was pulled over and subsequently detained." Wilson nodded grimly. "I intend to find out myself, sir." Outside the station, Rita's video was spreading like wildfire. What had started as a local social media post had caught the attention of several military groups and civil rights organizations. The hashtag #RespectTheGeneral was trending, and the video had been viewed over 100,000 times in just under an hour. Back at the scene of the traffic stop, 2 more patrol cars had arrived to collect Chen's vehicle. Officer Brooks, who had been Reynolds' partner during the stop, was talking with the responding officers, visibly distressed. "I tried to tell him," Brooks was saying, running a hand through his hair. The general was completely cooperative. Reynolds just wouldn't listen. One of the senior officers shook his head. "This is going to be bad, Brooks. Really bad." At the station, the front desk was starting to field calls. The first few came from local reporters who had picked up on the trending video. Then came calls from military public affairs offices, followed by increasingly high-ranking officials demanding information. Wilson had pulled Reynolds into a separate office, his face red with anger. "What were you thinking? Did you even run his ID?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. The car matched a description. "What description?" Wilson demanded. "Be specific." "Dark sedan, male driver this area," Reynolds repeated lamely. "That's half the cars on the road." Wilson exploded. "And even if the car did match some vague description, the moment he showed you military ID, you should have verified it." "It could have been fake," Reynolds insisted, though his confidence was clearly waning. "So you verify it." "That's the job." Wilson was nearly shouting now. "Instead, you handcuffed a 3-star general and brought him in like a common criminal. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before Reynolds could respond, there was a knock at the door. The desk officer poked his head in, looking nervous. "Sarge, there are some military personnel here, and the phone won't stop ringing. We've got calls from the mayor's office, the governor's office, and—" He lowered his voice. "Someone claiming to be from the Interior Ministry." Wilson closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. "Tell them I'll be right there." As the officer left, Wilson turned back to Reynolds. "Stay here. Don't move." In the main area of the station, Colonel Lee had arrived with Major Diana Rivera, a military legal officer. They were in full uniform, their presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. Behind them stood 2 military police officers, also in uniform. Wilson approached them, extending his hand. "Colonel, I'm Sergeant Wilson. General Chen is in my office. If you'll follow me, I want a full explanation of why my commanding officer was detained." Lee interrupted, his voice controlled but filled with authority. "And I want to see all officers involved in this incident." "Of course," Wilson agreed immediately. "This way, please." As they walked toward his office, the front doors of the station burst open again. This time it was Chief of Police Gregory Taylor, who had clearly been called in from home, still adjusting his tie as he strode in. "Where is he?" Taylor demanded, spotting Wilson. "Where's General Chen?" "In my office, Chief," Wilson replied, "along with Colonel Lee and Major Rivera, who just arrived." Taylor nodded curtly and joined the group. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Inside Wilson's office, Chen was sitting calmly, reviewing some notes he had made about the incident. He stood as the group entered, exchanging salutes with his military colleagues. "Sir," Lee said, his relief at seeing Chen unharmed evident in his voice. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Tom," Chen assured him, then turned to Major Rivera. "Diana, good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Chief Taylor stepped forward, extending his hand. "General Chen, I'm Chief Gregory Taylor. I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for this incident. This is not how our department operates, and I assure you there will be a full investigation." Chen shook Taylor's hand firmly. "I appreciate that, Chief. I'd like to know what happens next." "First, you're free to go, of course," Taylor said quickly. "No charges, no record of any kind. This was a terrible mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Chen replied evenly. "It was a deliberate act of discrimination. Officer Reynolds made several racially charged comments during my detention. He refused to verify my identity. He escalated a routine traffic stop into an arrest without cause." The room fell silent. Major Rivera took out a notepad. "Sir, if I may, I'd like to record your full account of the incident for our records." Chen nodded. "Of course." As Chen began recounting the events in precise detail, the station's front desk was becoming increasingly chaotic. News vans had begun to arrive outside, and the phone system was overwhelmed with calls. Social media had exploded with the story, and Rita's video had now been picked up by several major news networks. In another office, Reynolds sat alone, scrolling through his phone with growing horror as he saw the video of his actions spreading online. His face was clearly visible, his words audible. Comments were pouring in, many from military personnel expressing outrage. For the first time, the reality of what he had done began to sink in. The door opened, and Officer Brooks entered, his expression grim. "They want us both in the conference room," Brooks said flatly. "Internal Affairs is here." Reynolds swallowed hard. "Brooks, you have to back me up here. Say the general was acting suspicious." Brooks stared at Reynolds in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm not lying for you, Pat. In fact, I already told Sergeant Wilson that I tried to get you to verify the general's ID and you refused." He shook his head. "You're on your own with this one." As Reynolds and Brooks made their way to the conference room, they passed the main lobby. Through the glass doors, they could see the growing media presence outside. Several uniformed military personnel had also arrived and were speaking with reporters. In the conference room, a somber group waited. Chief Taylor, Sergeant Wilson, 2 Internal Affairs officers, Colonel Lee, and Major Rivera. Reynolds felt his stomach drop as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Officer Reynolds," Chief Taylor began, his voice ice cold, "you will surrender your badge and gun immediately. You are placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Officer Brooks, you will provide a complete statement to Internal Affairs." Reynolds paled. "Chief, I was just doing my job. Save it for the investigation," Taylor cut him off. "The general has graciously agreed not to press criminal charges at this time, though that's his right. You should consider yourself extremely fortunate." As Reynolds reluctantly handed over his badge and gun, the reality of his situation began to crystallize. His career was in jeopardy. His reputation was destroyed, and it was all being documented in real time for the world to see. Outside the station, General Chen emerged, flanked by Colonel Lee and Major Rivera. His car had been brought to the station and he was free to go. But the damage had been done, to the police department's reputation, to community relations, and to Chen himself, despite his dignified bearing. As reporters shouted questions, Chen raised a hand for silence. He would not speak to the press tonight. There would be time for that later. For now, he simply wanted to go home, gather his thoughts, and prepare for what he knew would be a long fight for accountability and change. What he didn't yet know was that the highest levels of government had already been alerted, and the Interior Ministry was preparing to intervene in a way that would send shockwaves through law enforcement agencies nationwide. Dawn broke over the city as Lieutenant General Robert Chen sat in his home office, phone in hand. He had barely slept. The events of the previous night kept replaying in his mind. The flash of police lights, the cold metal of handcuffs against his wrists, Officer Reynolds' sneering voice. 30 years of military service, countless medals, and he had been treated like a common criminal because of the color of his skin. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since he'd arrived home. Calls from fellow officers, from friends, from family members who had seen the news. The video had gone viral overnight, already viewed millions of times. Chen had watched it once and couldn't bring himself to view it again. The call he was waiting for finally came at 6:45 a.m. General Chen, came the voice of General Howard Walker, the Army Chief of Staff. I just watched the video. This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. Yes, sir, Chen replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. The Secretary of Defense has been briefed. The President will be informed this morning. Walker's voice was tight with controlled anger. How are you holding up, Robert? I'm fine, sir, Chen said automatically, the response of a soldier who had learned to compartmentalize personal feelings. No, you're not, Walker countered, his tone softening. No one would be, but we're going to handle this. The full weight of the military and the government will be behind you. As Chen ended the call, his doorbell rang. Outside stood Colonel Lee and Major Rivera, both looking as though they hadn't slept either. Sir, Lee said as Chen opened the door. We have updates. Inside Chen's living room, Rivera opened her laptop. The situation has escalated significantly overnight, sir. The Interior Ministry has become directly involved. Chen raised his eyebrows. The Interior Ministry oversaw federal law enforcement and had broad authority over local police departments. Their involvement signaled that this incident was being treated with the utmost seriousness. Deputy Interior Minister Patricia Huang issued a statement at 5 a.m. Rivera continued, turning the laptop so Chen could see. She's announced a federal investigation into the police department, with specific focus on Officer Reynolds and any pattern of discriminatory practices. Lee nodded grimly. It gets bigger, sir. Secretary of Defense Wilson called an emergency meeting with Joint Chiefs this morning. They're discussing a formal military response to the incident. Chen sighed deeply. What had happened to him was wrong, undeniably so, but he had never sought to become the center of a national controversy. What's happening at the police station? That's why we're here, Lee said.
Chief Taylor has requested an urgent meeting with you.
The mayor will be present, as well as representatives from the Interior Ministry. They're waiting for your response. Chen nodded slowly. Tell them I'll meet them at 10 a.m. at the mayor's office, not the police station. As Lee made the call, Chen's phone rang again. This time it was his daughter Alice calling from college. Dad? Her voice was thick with emotion. I saw the video. Are you okay? Chen felt his carefully maintained composure crack slightly. I'm okay, sweetheart. It's being handled. Being handled? Alice's voice rose. Dad, they handcuffed you. The things that officer said, I know, Chen said softly. And it's wrong. But I need you to focus on your studies. Let me deal with this. After reassuring his daughter as best he could, Chen prepared for the meeting. He chose to wear his full dress uniform, complete with all decorations. Today he would remind everyone of exactly who they were dealing with. Across town, the police station was in chaos. News vans lined the street outside, reporters clamoring for statements. Inside, internal affairs officers were pulling records, interviewing officers and reviewing body cam footage from all of Reynolds' previous arrests. Officer Reynolds sat alone in a small room, waiting for his union representative. His phone had been blowing up with messages, some supportive from certain colleagues, many more condemning his actions. His family had already received threats. His face was all over the news, labeled as the racist cop who arrested a decorated general. The door opened and Chief Taylor entered with a woman in a crisp suit. Reynolds, Taylor said coldly. This is Special Agent Lin from the Interior Ministry. She has some questions for you. Reynolds looked up, fear evident in his eyes. I want my union rep present. He's on his way, Taylor replied. But you should know that this goes far beyond a departmental issue now. The Interior Ministry has jurisdiction and they're not playing around. Agent Lin set a folder on the table. Officer Reynolds, we've been reviewing your record. 15 complaints of excessive force in the past 3 years. 12 of those from minorities. That's a pattern that can't be ignored. Reynolds swallowed hard. Those complaints were dismissed. Yes, Lynn said evenly. They were. That's also part of our investigation. Why valid complaints were repeatedly dismissed without proper investigation. As they spoke, the mayor's office was preparing for the meeting. Mayor David Thompson had canceled all other appointments for the day. This crisis demanded his full attention. The general is on his way, his assistant informed him, along with Deputy Interior Minister Huang and 2 military lawyers. The press is requesting a statement. Thompson nodded tensely. No statements until after the meeting. And make sure the side entrance is clear. I don't want the general to have to wade through reporters. At precisely 10 a.m., General Chen arrived at the mayor's office flanked by Colonel Lee and Major Rivera. They were escorted immediately to the conference room where a somber group awaited them. Mayor Thompson stood to greet them, extending his hand. General Chen, thank you for coming. I want to personally apologize for what happened last night. Chen shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your willingness to address this matter promptly. Deputy Interior Minister Huang stepped forward. She was a small woman with a commanding presence, her expression serious. General Chen, I'm Patricia Huang. On behalf of the Interior Ministry, I want to assure you that we are taking this incident extremely seriously. As they all took their seats, Chief Taylor entered, looking haggard. General, my deepest apologies for my officer's conduct. I want you to know that Officer Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave, pending termination proceedings. Chen nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing. He waited for them to lay out their proposals before responding. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. We've prepared a public statement condemning the actions of Officer Reynolds and announcing a comprehensive review of department policies. We'll be implementing mandatory bias training for all officers effective immediately. That's a start, Huang said, her tone making it clear she expected more. But the Interior Ministry is launching a full investigation into your department, Chief Taylor. We'll be reviewing all complaints over the past 5 years, all use of force incidents, and all hiring and promotion practices. Taylor paled slightly, but nodded. We'll cooperate fully. Chen listened carefully, his expression neutral. When they had finished outlining their immediate responses, he finally spoke. These steps address the symptoms, he said quietly, but not the disease. One officer has been singled out, and rightly so. But Reynolds didn't act in a vacuum. His partner failed to intervene effectively. The system failed to address previous complaints. The culture of the department allowed him to believe he could act this way with impunity. The room fell silent as Chen continued, his voice gaining strength. I don't want special treatment because of my rank. I want appropriate treatment because I'm a citizen. Every person who looks like me deserves that same treatment, whether they wear stars on their shoulders or work at the local grocery store. Huang nodded approvingly. General Chen is right. This isn't just about one incident or one officer. It's about systemic issues that must be addressed. As they discussed specific reforms, Chen's aide, Captain Wilson Pham, entered the room, carrying a tablet. He leaned down to whisper in Chen's ear. Sir, I think you should see this. It's important. Chen excused himself momentarily to review what Pham had brought. It was a compilation of evidence. Previous complaints against Reynolds that had been buried, body cam footage that had been lost, and witness statements that had never been followed up on. Most disturbingly, text messages between Reynolds and several other officers revealing a pattern of racist comments and attitudes. Chen returned to the table, his expression grave. Chief Taylor, I believe you need to see this. As Taylor reviewed the evidence, his face grew increasingly ashen. This wasn't just about one bad officer anymore. This was evidence of a cultural problem within his department, one that he had either missed or ignored. Taylor struggled to find words. I had no idea the problem was this extensive. I find that hard to believe, Huang said coldly. But what matters now is how we address it. The meeting continued for 3 more hours, resulting in a comprehensive plan that went far beyond the original proposals. By the time they emerged, a joint statement had been prepared announcing not just Reynolds' suspension, but a complete overhaul of department practices, with oversight from both the Interior Ministry and military advisors. Outside the mayor's office, reporters had gathered in force. As Chen stepped to the microphones, cameras flashed and questions were shouted. He raised a hand for silence. What happened to me was wrong, he began, his voice steady and clear. But it happens to people who look like me every day. People without stars on their shoulders. People without the power to generate national attention. Today we've taken the first steps toward ensuring it doesn't happen again. To anyone. As Chen spoke across town, Officer Reynolds watched the press conference on a small TV in the station's break room. The weight of his actions and their consequences was finally beginning to sink in. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. And for what? A moment of prejudice that had revealed the worst parts of himself to the world. What Reynolds didn't yet know was that his reckoning was just beginning. The evidence Captain Pham had uncovered would lead to criminal charges against not just Reynolds but several other officers. The Interior Ministry's investigation would eventually result in the replacement of half the department's leadership, and General Chen, despite his desire to return to his military duties, would find himself at the center of a national conversation about race, power, and accountability, a role he never sought but would ultimately embrace with the same dignity and determination that had carried him through 30 years of military service. The intervention had begun, but the story was far from over. 3 days after General Chen's wrongful detention, the story had exploded across the nation. Every major news network led with updates on what people were now calling the general's arrest. Talk shows, podcasts, and social media platforms buzzed with heated discussions about racism, police accountability, and privilege. In his modest suburban home, General Chen sat in his living room, remote in hand, flipping through channels that all seemed to be talking about him. His phone had been ringing nonstop with interview requests from journalists, statements of support from fellow military officers, and even a call from the president himself. "Turn it off," suggested his daughter Alice, who had come home from college despite his insistence that she focus on her studies. "You don't need to watch all this." Chen sighed and pressed the power button. "It's strange seeing yourself become a symbol overnight." "You've always been a symbol, Dad," Alice said, sitting beside him. "The difference is now everyone else sees it too." Outside their home, 2 military police officers stood guard. They had been assigned after several threatening messages had been sent to the Chen family, a sad but predictable backlash from those who sided with Officer Reynolds. Across town, Reynolds sat in his attorney's office, staring blankly at the wall as his lawyer explained the growing list of charges against him. "It's not just departmental anymore," the lawyer explained, his tone grim. "The Interior Ministry is pushing for federal civil rights violations, and they've uncovered enough evidence to make it stick." Reynolds ran a hand over his face. "What about the other guys?" "I wasn't the only one with complaints. 5 other officers have been suspended," his lawyer confirmed. "But you're the face of this now. The video made sure of that." The lawyer shuffled some papers. "They're offering a deal. Full cooperation. Testimony against the others involved in covering up complaints and a guilty plea to lesser charges." Reynolds laughed bitterly. "So I throw everyone else under the bus to save myself?" "It's either that or face the full force of the federal government," his lawyer said bluntly. "They're making an example of you either way." At City Hall, Mayor Thompson was meeting with his crisis management team. The city's phones were ringing off the hook. Email servers were crashing from the volume of messages, and protesters had gathered outside the police headquarters for 3 straight days. "The Interior Ministry's preliminary report will be released tomorrow," his chief of staff informed him. "It's going to be bad, David, really bad." Thompson nodded grimly. "What about our community outreach initiative?" "General Chen has agreed to participate in the town hall meeting next week," came the reply. "It's a start, but people want action, not just talk." "And the lawsuit?" The city attorney winced. "Chen hasn't filed yet, but his military lawyers have prepared everything. If he decides to sue, we're looking at millions." In Washington, Deputy Interior Minister Huang sat in a meeting with the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, and several senior military officials. The atmosphere was tense as they reviewed the evidence compiled against not just Reynolds but the entire police department. "This goes beyond one incident," Huang stated firmly. "We've found evidence of systematic discrimination going back at least 7 years. Complaints buried, evidence lost, officers with problematic histories promoted rather than disciplined." The Attorney General nodded. "We're prepared to bring the full weight of the Justice Department to bear. This will be a landmark case." General Walker, the Army Chief of Staff, leaned forward. "What about General Chen? He's become the face of this issue. But he's first and foremost a military officer with duties to perform. He's handling it with remarkable grace, the Secretary of Defense replied. But you're right. We need to be mindful of the pressure he's under. Back in the city, Rita, the woman who had recorded the viral video, found herself unexpectedly in the spotlight. News vans parked outside her apartment, reporters called her phone, and social media declared her a hero. I just did what anyone should do, she told her neighbor as they watched another news segment about the case. I saw something wrong and I recorded it. Not everyone would have stopped, her neighbor pointed out. Most people would have driven by. Rita shook her head. That's the problem, isn't it? Too many people just drive by. At the police station, the atmosphere was tense and divided. Some officers openly condemned Reynolds' actions, while others maintained a code of silence, viewing the situation as an attack on all police. In the break room, Officer Brooks sat with several colleagues, watching news coverage of the Interior Ministry's investigation. They're talking about disbanding the entire department, one officer said nervously, bringing in federal oversight for at least 5 years. Brooks shook his head. Can you blame them? We've had problems for years. Everyone knew it. So you're taking their side now? Another officer challenged. There aren't sides here, Brooks replied firmly. There's right and wrong. What happened to General Chen was wrong. And it wasn't isolated. We all know that. The conversation fell silent as Chief Taylor entered the room. He looked years older than he had just days ago, the stress evident in his face. The Interior Ministry team wants to interview all of you, he announced. I expect full cooperation. No exceptions. As Taylor turned to leave, Brooks called after him. Chief, what happens now? To the department? Taylor paused, his shoulders slumping slightly. That depends on us, Brooks. On whether we're willing to admit our failings and actually change. 7 days after the incident, the town hall meeting was set to begin. The community center was packed to capacity, with hundreds more people gathered outside. Local television stations were broadcasting live. On the stage sat Mayor Thompson, Chief Taylor, Deputy Minister Huang, and at the center, General Chen looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces reflecting anger, hope, frustration, and expectation. He had given countless briefings in war zones, had addressed the United Nations, had testified before Congress. Yet somehow, this felt more important than any of those. As the mayor made introductions, Chen studied his notes. He had prepared remarks, carefully crafted with the help of military public affairs officers. But looking at the crowd, he knew those prepared words wouldn't be enough. When it was his turn to speak, Chen set his notes aside and stepped to the microphone. A week ago, he began, his voice calm and measured. I was driving home from a military conference. I was tired. I was thinking about visiting my daughter at college. I was thinking about ordinary things the way any of us do at the end of a long day. The room fell completely silent. Then came the flashing lights, the order to step out of my car, the handcuffs, the comments about you people. In that moment, I wasn't a general. I wasn't even seen as a soldier who has served this country for 30 years. I was just another person of color, assumed guilty until proven innocent. Chen paused, looking directly at the crowd. What happened to me made national news because of my rank. But it happens every day to people without stars on their shoulders, people who don't have the Pentagon and the Interior Ministry rushing to their defense. Those are the people I'm thinking about today. Around the room, many people nodded in recognition, some wiping away tears. I never wanted to be the face of this issue, Chen continued. But now that I am, I intend to use this position to push for real change. Not just in this department, but in how we think about policing and community and respect. As Chen spoke, Officer Reynolds watched the broadcast from his living room. His wife sat beside him holding his hand. His children had been sent to stay with relatives after threats had been made against them, another ugly consequence of his actions. He's a better man than me, Reynolds said quietly, watching Chen speak with dignity and restraint. I ruined my life, put my family at risk, damaged the entire department. And for what? His wife had no answer. There was no good answer to give. Back at the town hall, Chen was finishing his remarks. This isn't the end of something, he told the crowd. It's the beginning of hard conversations, of uncomfortable truths, of necessary changes. I didn't ask for this role, but I accept it. And I ask each of you to accept your role too, in holding institutions accountable, in demanding better, in working together toward a community where what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. As Chen stepped back from the microphone, the room erupted in applause. Not the polite, obligatory kind, but the thunderous applause of people who had heard something true, something necessary, something that spoke to their own experiences and hopes. The path forward would not be easy. The Interior Ministry's investigation would continue for months. The police department would undergo painful but necessary reforms. Officer Reynolds and others would face the legal consequences of their actions. But in that moment, as General Chen stood tall amidst the applause, something had shifted. A single incident had become a catalyst for change. A wrong had created an opportunity for something right. The story wasn't over, but a new chapter had begun. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when General Chen was wrongfully detained. Autumn had given way to winter, then spring, and now the first hints of summer warmed the air. The media frenzy had gradually subsided, but the impact of what happened continued to ripple through the community and beyond. General Chen stood at the podium in the city's newly established Police Oversight Committee headquarters, addressing the diverse group of citizens, officials, and officers who now made up the committee. The audience listened intently as he spoke about the changes implemented in the wake of what many now simply called the incident. Today marks the official completion of the Interior Ministry's investigation, Chen announced, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had guided him through 30 years of military service. The final report has been made public, and with it comes both accountability and a path forward. In the audience, Mayor Thompson nodded gravely. Beside him sat Chief Taylor, who had managed to keep his position by fully cooperating with the investigation and embracing the reforms that followed. His department had been transformed. Nearly a third of the senior officers had been replaced, training protocols completely overhauled, and a civilian review board established with real power to investigate complaints. The report confirms what many in the community have known for years, Chen continued. A pattern of discriminatory practices that targeted minorities, a culture that protected problematic officers, and leadership that turned a blind eye to clear warning signs. Chen flipped to the next page of his notes. But this report is not just about what went wrong. It's about what's changing. The Interior Ministry has officially recognized the reforms implemented over the past 6 months as a model for other departments across the country. In the back of the room, Rita sat quietly. The woman whose video had sparked a national conversation had declined every offer to monetize her sudden fame. Instead, she had accepted a position on the Civilian Review Board, where her attention to detail and unwavering sense of justice had proven invaluable. After the presentation, Chen found himself surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. He answered questions patiently, emphasizing the collaborative nature of the reforms rather than his own role in them. As the crowd thinned, a young officer approached him hesitantly. "Sir," the officer said, extending his hand. "I'm Officer Anthony Brooks." Chen smiled in recognition. "The partner, the one who tried to intervene." Brooks nodded, looking both surprised and pleased that Chen remembered him. "Not hard enough, sir. I should have done more." "You did something," Chen replied. "That's more than most would have done. And I understand you've been quite vocal about the reforms." "Yes, sir. I'm heading up the new cadet training program now. We're teaching officers to recognize and respond to bias, including their own." Brooks hesitated. "Actually, sir, there's someone who wants to meet with you. He's been asking for months, but no one thought it was a good idea until now." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Officer Reynolds," Brooks nodded. "He's completed the restorative justice program. Part of that is making amends if you're willing." Chen considered the request carefully. He had no desire to revisit the pain of that night, yet he understood the importance of closure, not just for Reynolds, but for himself. "Arrange it," he finally said, "but not at the station. Somewhere neutral." 3 days later, Chen sat at a small table in a community center meeting room. He had deliberately arrived early, choosing a seat that allowed him to face the door. Old habits from a military career. Always be aware of your surroundings, always have a clear view of entrances and exits. When the door opened, Chen was struck by how different Reynolds looked. The swagger was gone, replaced by a careful hesitancy. He had lost weight, and his face showed the strain of the past 6 months. Reynolds paused in the doorway as if gathering courage, then approached the table. "General Chen," he said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Chen gestured to the chair across from him. "Have a seat, Mr. Reynolds." The use of Mr. rather than officer wasn't lost on Reynolds, who winced slightly as he sat down. His badge and career were gone, part of the plea agreement he had eventually accepted. "I've prepared something to say," Reynolds began, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "If that's okay." Chen nodded, his expression neutral but not unkind. Reynolds unfolded the paper with slightly trembling hands. "First, I want to apologize for my actions that night. My treatment of you was unprofessional, disrespectful, and wrong. I allowed prejudice to guide my actions, and I violated not only department policy but basic human decency." He paused, looking up from his paper to meet Chen's eyes directly. "I've spent months in therapy examining the beliefs that led me to act the way I did. I've confronted ugly truths about myself that I had denied for years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know that what happened that night has changed me fundamentally." Chen listened without interrupting, his military training evident in his composed demeanor. When Reynolds finished speaking, Chen remained silent for a moment, considering his response. "Mr. Reynolds," he finally said, "I appreciate your apology. I believe you are sincere in your regret. But this was never just about you and me." Chen leaned forward slightly. What happened that night was a symptom of something much larger. It reflected attitudes and practices that have harmed countless people who didn't have my rank or resources to fight back. My hope is that your journey of self-reflection doesn't end with me." Reynolds nodded slowly. "It won't, sir. I'm working with the Community Reconciliation Program now, sharing my story with cadets, showing them where bias can lead. It's humbling work." "Good," Chen said simply. "That's where healing starts. Not just for you, but for the community you damaged." As their meeting concluded, both men rose from their seats. There was no handshake, no dramatic moment of forgiveness. Just a quiet acknowledgement that something important had occurred, a necessary conversation in the long process of reconciliation. That evening, General Chen arrived home to find his daughter Alice waiting. She had graduated college the previous week and was preparing to start officer training herself, inspired by her father's example. "How did it go?" she asked as Chen hung up his jacket. "The meeting with Reynolds?" Chen considered the question as he sat down beside her. "It went as well as it could. He's changing. Whether that change lasts is up to him." Alice nodded thoughtfully. "Dad, do you ever regret becoming the face of this issue? Your last year before retirement has been all about this instead of your military accomplishments." Chen smiled gently at his daughter. "Sometimes leadership doesn't look the way we expect. This wasn't a battle I chose, but it was one that needed fighting." Later that night, Chen stood at his office window, looking out at the quiet street. On his desk lay a letter from the president, commending his handling of the situation and his work on the police reform initiative. Beside it was a file containing the final Interior Ministry report, with its detailed accounts of systemic problems and recommended solutions. Chen thought about the changes of the past 6 months, the officers who had been held accountable, the new oversight mechanisms, the community engagement programs. He thought about Officer Brooks and his determination to train a better generation of police. He thought about Rita and her courage in speaking truth to power. He even thought about Reynolds and the long road of redemption he now walked. None of it erased what had happened that night. The handcuffs had left no physical marks, but some wounds went deeper than skin. Yet Chen had always believed that purpose could be found even in pain. That meaning could emerge from injustice if people were willing to do the hard work of change. As he prepared to return to his military duties the following week, Chen knew that his legacy would now forever include this unexpected chapter. His name would be associated not just with military strategy and leadership, but with a moment that had sparked genuine reform. In the end, perhaps that was as valuable a service as any he had rendered in uniform. Not the confrontation itself, but what had grown from it, a community healing, a system reforming, and a reminder that accountability was not the enemy of justice, but its necessary companion. The stars on Chen's shoulders had always represented responsibility. Now they represented something more, a reminder that no one, regardless of rank or position, should be above accountability, and no one, regardless of appearance or background, should be beneath dignity and respect.